This is The Son of Man by one of my favorite artists, Magritte. Even if you're not into art, this image is so iconic that you're probably familiar with it already. But whether it is your 100th or your first time seeing it, you're most likely as confused by it as anyone else. Not only that, but I find that the longer I stare at this painting, the more disturbing it is to me. There's just something about the imagery here, the different colors Magritte uses and other subtleties that enshroud the painting with an eerily mysterious atmosphere, which make the viewer deeply uncomfortable. And the thing is, that apple is far from being the weirdest thing about this painting. At first glance, the painting is really very simple. In terms of composition, we only have our main subject, this faceless, elegantly dressed gentleman, perfectly centered in the foreground, along with the jarringly incoherent green apple covering his face. And then, in the background, we have a low wall and what we can only assume is the sea behind it in the distance. Certain focal points in the main subject, such as the red tie or the bowler hat, instantly capture our attention due to the clever use of contrasting hue and shape. But apart from these three elements, the hat, the apple, and the red tie, there's arguably nothing else that's immediately interesting or engaging about this portrait. It's literally just a man standing still. In fact, if the apple wasn't covering his face and he was instead holding it, for instance, you might not give the painting much attention. And yet, that is not the case. There's something about these elements that don't sit well together. All of them seem to be out of place in this coastal, seemingly peaceful scenery. Now, obviously, the apple is clearly out of place, but you see, the man is too. This excessively formal attire, coupled with his unnaturally, borderline robotic upright position, doesn't blend well into this background, making him stand out so much more. In fact, if we moved him into a more industrial, perhaps urban setting, you can see what I mean. It turns out that this juxtaposition between images which are seemingly unrelated is one of the main characteristics of the Surrealist movement, of which Magritte was one of its pioneers. Surrealist artists, poets, and writers were inspired by Freud's work on dreams and the unconscious to develop an entirely new art form which strove to create images completely disconnected from reason or reality. As a result, many of these paintings had a dreamlike quality to them, being devoid of logic and therefore somewhat disturbing. Many artists in this movement used symbols and shapes to convey meaning, refusing to use real-world objects completely. Magritte's case was different. In The Son of Man, he uses regular subjects such as a man, an apple, or a wall, but there is no connection between them. We can try to reason our way through the purpose, for example, of this apple in the painting by saying perhaps that the painting captures the moment during the apple's fall from above the frame when it covered the man's face entirely, and yet there is no visual context backing this reasoning in the painting. We are making it up. For one, there is no suggestion of there being a tree nearby. No leaves, no trunk, not even dirt, since we imagine the man is standing on concrete similar to that of the wall behind him. And also, there is no indication of movement in the apple. It's most intentionally stagnant, literally floating in front of the man's face. Actually, it's pretty concerning how perfectly positioned it is, with its symmetrical leaves, almost perfect round shape, and covering all of the facial features of the man, except for the corner of his left eye, and a small portion of eyebrow. just enough to tell us that there is indeed a face behind the apple. Of course, the man could be real. In fact, this is believed to be a self-portrait of Magritte himself, which it could well be. The apple and the background could be real too. But this scene, with its perfect symmetry and its visual incongruence, is not something you expect to see in real life. And the artist makes sure to remind you of its dreamlike nature through subtle visual cues. For instance, take a look at the man's left arm. If you haven't noticed yet, yes, that's his elbow. His left arm is facing the sea. And yet, the rest of the man's body is clearly facing the viewer. Again, subtle but powerful. Another favorite of mine is the weather. The portion of the sky that is visible to the viewer is clearly very cloudy and grey. And yet, the sea is flat as a pancake. No waves, no turbulence, just unnaturally still blue waters. This in itself helps to create a tonal inconsistency in the piece, which we don't consciously notice unless we've been looking at the painting for a while. Also, there's something about the man himself that's weird too. He almost looks impossibly tall. This is largely due to the fact that we can't even see his legs under his huge overcoat, so we don't know where his waist ends. But on top of this, notice how cleverly the painter has framed him in the scene so that he appears to be touching both the ground and the sky at the same time, like some sort of giant. The low wall, occupying only about a sixth of the painting's height in comparison to the sky, which takes up almost half of it, also helped to create the impression of an abnormally tall man, almost as if he'd been stretched. And like everything else in this image, it just looks off. But back to the apple. There are some theories that claim that the apple was included because Magritte didn't know what expression to capture in the man, presumably himself. Others venture to say that it has a biblical connection due to the title suggesting this is the offspring of Adam and Eve. In other words, this is humanity, still blind due to their original sin, represented by the apple. But in my opinion, these theories ignore something. Faceless characters are something of a motif in Magritte's work. In fact, the Son of Man is part of a trilogy of very similar paintings, with a stiff, ordinary figure with their face covered by a random subject. Everything we see hides another thing, and we always want to see what is hidden by what we see, Magritte said about these paintings. There is an interest in that which is hidden and which the visible does not show us. This interest can take the form of quite an intense feeling, a sort of conflict, one might say, between the visible that is hidden and the visible that is present. What makes the Son of Man and these other portraits so captivating is that they're not portraits. They refuse to show us the face of the subject, leaving it up to our imaginations, and yet they tease us by showing us a little bit of an eye here or a touch of an eyebrow there. It's quite clear that Magritte wanted these subjects he painted to have no identity. They wear ordinary clothes, stand still in no particularly interesting or memorable way, and they just stare at us, or at least we imagine they are. It could well be that Magritte titled the painting The Son of Man to tell us that this man's identity isn't really important because he could be anyone and he is everyone. He is just the Son of Man. To me, the Son of Man is about personal identity. As humans, we think we know what other humans are like, what they feel, what they think, and who they are. Magritte, however, seems to disagree. In a way, he seems to be saying that we're all mysteries. No matter how hard you try, you will never truly know others. You can try to lean to one side or the other, but you'll never see their true face, their true self. We can see what other people want us to see, their clothes, their hat, and in some cases, as in Magritte's, this is what we imagine when we think of them. But their true nature is facing the other way, towards the sea. It's not on display for us, it's deeper than that. But what makes this painting a real masterpiece in my eyes is not what it means to me, or to anyone for that matter. The beauty of this portrait lies in its questions, not in their answers. It may well make no sense, but that's kind of the point. Because even if its meaning is hidden, it doesn't mean it cannot be visible. Thank you for watching this episode of Pocket Museum. If you like what you see, please consider supporting the channel by liking and sharing the video. Also, remember to subscribe to the channel for new videos every Friday. They're not always about art, but if you found this interesting, I'm sure you'll like my other series too. If you want to see more of these types of videos, please let me know in the comments, and also feel free to suggest any artists or paintings that you would like me to cover in future videos. Now, as always, stay curious, and I'll see you soon. Peace.